All right, is this on? Can you hear me through this mic? Okay, great. Could I have one of you AV gentlemen come up real quick to help me, please? Sorry about this. Don't you love leaving the adapter at home? So I'm Phillip, and get started. What I would like to do is have presentation mode here, and or speaker mode here, and presentation on these screens. Mm-hmm. So it's not. It didn't do what I thought it would do.
Oh,
so.
okay. Get us both the screens.
Yes.
I got you.
Okay. So while he's very kindly setting it up for me, first of all, thank you for not going to see the parade. I was tempted myself, but then I thought Joe would probably chase me down, even in a crowd of 500,000 people. And go Hawks. How many of you are Seahawks fans? Pretty good number. How many of you are from out of town? I'm just curious. Wow. I'm mistaken. I was telling somebody that I thought this was a very, very local conference. But who is from the farthest away? Let's say, who's from outside of the Pacific Northwest? Okay, a much smaller number. Who is from the eastern half of the United States? Wow, also a pretty good number. Okay, I'll stop asking those questions. That's great. Thank you. Welcome to the Pacific Northwest. It's not usually this cold, and in the summer it is this beautiful. So I've only moved up here 2 years, and all the Seattleites will kill me for telling you the secret that it's actually quite lovely up here most of the year around. I want you to imagine an experience. Not this one, which is also equally difficult, but imagine the last time a friend made a restaurant recommendation to you. So they had gone there, they had really enjoyed it. It was a place you've never been before. So is everyone, I think that's a fairly universal experience. So how many of you, so imagine that you follow up on that and you go to the restaurant without your friend, and you order dinner, you enjoy dinner, the service, you experience dinner, you have dinner. The service is fine, but at the end of the meal, you don't want to go back there. You don't want to return to this restaurant. And you realize it's not because the food was poorly prepared or not because you didn't have good service, but there was just something about the restaurant that maybe didn't make you comfortable, and you just you don't prefer the food. It was food that, it wasn't bad food, it's just not food you're interested in eating again. And so I want you to hold that idea in your mind of something that was well done. The chef did his or her job properly. The wait staff did their jobs. The restaurant was comfortable and it shielded you from the environment and all that. Okay, great, thank you. Yay for people who know. But you realize that there's this difference between what you experienced and what the people tried to have you experience. And they didn't do their jobs poorly, it just didn't do something for you. So we're going to talk today, I'm going to talk today, you can talk too, although it'll be rude. But we'll talk about getting the experience right. How do we know that we're providing the right kind of experience? And I would imagine that since Kelly's was the only talk prior to mine, you were in here for that, and a lot of the topics that she touched on will merge quite nicely with what I'll talk about. So I'll talk about how to get the experience right, and then I'm also to talk about how do you know as a user experience professional that you're equipped to provide that experience, to design that experience, to create it. And so, yes, we'll talk about those two things. So, as digital professionals, when we think of experience, this is often what pops into our mind first. We're very focused on, almost mono-focused on our little digital realms that we inhabit. And so we think of a single person with a device running an operating system and a set of applications. So this is just what we think of. Most of you probably know, but a lot of the world thinks differently about digital experiences. In fact, a great majority of them still think this way, that digital experiences are something that they have to do because they are part of life now, but they would rather not do, and they'd like to put it off, in fact. And then when they do have to engage in it, it's something that's not that enjoyable and doesn't make them look forward to the next time. And so, I'm sorry, I have to stop one more thing. Switching computers is painful. All right. Okay. Now we're back on track. Okay, and so just a cursory examination of things online will tell you that there's still a lot of pain out there. Just searching for a simple phrase like mad at my phone, 25.2 million hits. And all sorts of things from videos to rants and tweets and all sorts of things that show you that people just still aren't getting along with the technology, aren't necessarily enjoying the digital experiences. And you still see things like this quote that comes up, these sorts of things come up from time to time. Now, I think one of the reasons that we see these sort of disconnects still between the good work we think we're doing and some of the realities that are still out there in the real world are that experience as a whole is much bigger than what we do as professionals. People are engaged in all sorts of things as they go through their lives, their daily lives, and a lot of those things don't have anything to do with technology or digital experiences. Now, of course, we all know that there are plenty of instances where we are engaged with our technology, but even in these situations, they're often in service of a larger context, a larger set of experiences that are ongoing that technology has come into and maybe providing some element to and some use, but is not making up the entirety. This woman is at a traditional Polish wedding in Chicago. I don't know what she's taking a picture of, if she's taking a picture. Looks like it might be an interesting view. But she's clearly part of something that is much bigger than what she does. And even Saturday mornings are about Saturday mornings, and they might involve cartoons, or they might involve getting on your own personal Mac when you're 8 years old. But the thing is that it's part of something bigger. And even when digital experiences are fairly constrained, there are often things that are going on with us that impact those experiences in a way that we don't necessarily anticipate, don't necessarily think about. Think about trying to use your phone with both of your thumbs injured. Most of us would feel like we had lost our phone, practically speaking. But I'm not here to debate technology. It is something that is part of our daily lives. And this next statement I'll throw up here is not something that you would necessarily disagree with. Experience is not, technology is not equate to experience. It is something that we are aware of. We know how it's part of life. It's part of some of our lives. It's part of more of our life than for other people, but it's not equal to experience. Now, what we do as professionals, though, is create ways to use technology. Right? That's the job we're in, and so often we're part of creating some sort of interface, and so I think we would all tend to agree with this statement too, that the interface is not equal to the experience. But here's the rub. A lot of times we talk about it as if the two are the same. So here's just a screenshot of a marketing page from Lenovo. And I don't mean to pick on them especially because this sort of language is all over the place. Uncommonly intuitive. The keyboard is uncommonly intuitive. I'm not sure what exactly that means. Now, it does have an adaptive keyboard. It has adaptive keys, and that's kind of interesting. But uncommonly intuitive is that the experience I'm supposed to have, or is that marketing blah blah blah? But regardless, the point is that it's talking about the interface, right? It's saying that interface is going to be intuitive and that conveys somehow some sort of benefit to me. Do I get a point for saying convey in my talk? Anyway, so the larger point then is that we create these interfaces and they have properties, they may be intuitive. I'm not going to really try to debate that. It may be easy, it may be fast, it may be clean, it may be fluid, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the same as the experience qualities of the person who is actually using that interface at the moment. And this is a hard thing for us to wrap our minds around, because we want to feel like the objects that we create, the interfaces, the devices, the services, we want to feel like those are almost pushing out an experience into our users' lives. But the reality is we are only imbuing the interfaces with certain properties. And I'm not here to debate those, although sometimes there's a little bit of marketing ease going on. But what I'm really getting at is just that it's a different thing, that these are two separate things. Fortunately, I'm not the first person to discover this, and maybe some of you are familiar with this, the background of this sort of thing. But over 100 years ago, philosophers, especially American philosophers, were exploring this idea of what experience means. John Dewey has some fantastic writings on it that I encourage you to read. But this is a quote from C.I. Lewis. Or it's a paraphrase, I may be more specific. So he's saying that the experiential qualities that people have are different in nature and in substance than the qualities, the properties of the object. So in other words, I can say that this glass is clear, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's useful for me to see through. And if I try to use this glass to see instead of to drink from, then my experience is not that great. It doesn't say anything about the glass. So speaking of, and the other point of his paraphrase here is that the experiential qualities that we have are intuitive. In other words, they come from inside. We produce them out of our backgrounds, our attitudes, what happened to us this morning, etc. And they're not subject to error or judgment. So I can't tell you, if you tell me you've had a terrible day, it's not really valid for me to say, it wasn't that bad. Or if you have frustration with a digital experience, and I say, oh, well, you just really need to know how to use it. That's a judgment I really shouldn't be making, right? It's not up to me to tell you what your experience is. But we have sort of started to inadvertently do this. So let's move on. So C.I. Lewis is talking about something that he calls qualia. So these are the intangible but identifiable things that make up our experiences. These the qualities. And so let's talk about some of what those how those appear in our lives. So colors. Most of us see colors differently. Most of us have different color preferences. Some of us tend to dress in certain colors and not in other colors, etc. The way we feel about colors, the way we respond to color, is qualia. It's an intangible but real and identifiable quality that happens within us. Tastes are the same. So you didn't like your friend's recommendation for the restaurant because you have a different set of tastes than they do. So you prefer other food, other restaurants. Perhaps the most easily identifiable one of these is pain. So we all know what it feels to feel pain, whether it's emotional pain, physical pain, and we know that that's a very, very subjective experience. Even when someone says, I feel your pain, or I know what you're going through, we know that they really don't, right? Because they're not feeling that at the moment. And we know that even when they do feel pain, it's often different than how we feel pain. You see some people who are more susceptible to emotional pain versus physical pain, and vice versa. The medical field has realized this about this type of qualia. And so many of you may be familiar with pain assessment tools that are in emergency rooms, doctors' offices, where a medical practitioner will ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, or 0 to 10, what level of pain are you having? Or can you use some of these words or point to one of these faces to help me as a professional understand? And then the practitioners can make a decision about what to do about that, to try to lessen pain or explore what it means more, but they don't try to judge it. They don't say, well, you're not really in that much pain, shut up, you big sissy, or anything like that. They accept that, and then they use that as actionable information. And so to draw this all together, we have to understand that there are properties that we create in our objects, and that there are qualia that people have in the experiences with those objects, and they are not to be confused. They may influence each other, and that's something to explore. But let's bring this back to the digital realm and take a look at this guy who is using a digital device. You can see he's in a temporary location, right? There's no decor or anything that tells that this is his office. He's kind of halfway turned out of his chair. You don't see the whole picture, but his notebook his MacBook is perched on the edge of the desk, the table he's at. It's not plugged in, so he's obviously in a temporary sort of situation. Now, if we were looking just at the device, we might say, hey, it's attractive, it's intuitive, it just works, it has lots of options, and these are interesting properties of the object. But he may have a whole other set of things going on that are his qualia, his experiential qualities that he's experiencing in the moment. And this is what we need to understand more of in our digital practice. We need to understand that even if we create something that is intuitive and attractive, it doesn't mean that people are going to have experiences based on those qualities or on those properties. And one thing that really makes this hard is that all that's invisible, sort of, right? It's you can see that an Apple product is well crafted, but it doesn't have a sticker on it, but you have no idea what's going on with him unless you ask. And so this is really where it ties into to Kelly's talk about how do we find out, and then more importantly, what do we do about it? Now, a lot of people have tried some different models that seem to incorporate this idea, but so this is a contextual model, it's not mine, that talks about all the elements of context. But you can see, well, you probably can't read it, but at the very top it's talking about culture and environment, and it starts to get at some social things there, religion, politics, where you are, your location, and your activity, but it's not really quite qualia yet. It may be a little bit less tangible than some of the other things listed there, but it's not quite those elements of experience yet. And then other people use, this is a journey map from Adaptive Path, so this is an emotional journey, and this is more interesting, right, because if you can see it, I'm sorry, it's sort of washed out there, but this is an emotional journey through the San Francisco airport to BART. And so somebody is greeted, there's a hug, there's moments where there's going to be apparent frustration or waiting or impatience or things like that. But all of these in the journey map are implied. There's nothing necessarily that says, here's what's being felt. And I think that's what is really missing in what we're trying to do when we create experiences. We aren't figuring out what needs to be felt. What are the qualia that matter? Now, in my initial explorations of this, I did this very crude model where I was exploring the idea of, wow, this stuff is really washed out. That's too bad. The little words don't matter so much, though, so thankfully. So the things in green are things that might attract us to an experience, a force that sort of draws us in, sort of like gravity or magnetism. And the things that are red are things that might push us away from an experience. So I was playing with this idea of forces that push and pull around experience, and I realized that wasn't quite getting where I wanted to be. So what I came up with is something called the Experience Profile Assessment Chart. And sorry for the long title, but that's sort of what wraps it up right now. So this is the idea of taking the elements of experience, the qualia that we can identify, whether people identify them to us or they're identified through our research, or they... oh, thank you. Sure. Okay. I have the power, the magic wand of power. So let me explain the structure before we dive into more. So each of these pairs and the very faint lines that are now invisible between them represent a continuum. So you can see that they're roughly opposites, this binariness to this, but I definitely want to get away from the binary thing. You'll see examples in a second. But the idea here is that all of our qualia fall somewhere in between two descriptors, two things that say more of this or less of this, and so there's a neutral zone, so that it's perfectly valid for something not to have a particular leaning either way. The black arrow across the bottom also gets to the idea that experience can change over time, and at the very least, you can think of a before, during, and after set of experiences, but you also can think of during the time that they're having a uniquely digital experience, something that we're working on, then that experience may change as well. We've all been working along fine on our laptop or whatever, and then something goes wrong, and we're furious. So our experience changes on a dime, and so there's this element of rough element of time that you can apply to this. But the idea that I'm getting at here is how do we capture the qualia that matter, and then how do we sort of map out where we're trying to get there? What experience are we trying to create? So let's go into an example. So this is a screenshot from, you tell me, Angry Birds, yes. Screenshot from Angry Birds Star Wars. I haven't actually played it, but I downloaded the game. And so anyway, it's a game. You know, it's a game. It's on your phone. It's fun. Anybody not know how to play Angry Birds? Okay, one person. Okay. The birds are like squawky rocks, and you use a slingshot and you shoot them at things, and then they fall down. So that's the game right there. Or they blow up or whatever. So what would be the experience profile of a game? Well, I say that it's something fairly simple like this. Few choices, tending towards confidence, tending towards unclear understanding, a little bit of engagement, high degree of unimportance, overall a positive experience, and relatively automatic or unconscious. It's a very simple game. You don't need a lot of brain power to do it. Point out, so it's kind of hard to see this, so let me blank out the things that I don't really care about for this particular experience. So I want to point out a couple of things here. One of these is negative sounding, right? Unclear understanding. How many of us design an experience in our minds that something's going to be unclear to the user? Well, this is an interesting thought, right? We don't think about that. We usually use words like, oh, it's very clear, it's clean, it's uncluttered. People can, get everything. But a game is actually, by definition, you want some degree of lack of clarity, because that's what makes a game fun. You don't know what's coming next, or you're not sure whether what you try is going to work. Also down here is unimportance. All of us like to think that the objects we create are important, right? We work hard on these things. It's got to matter. But in a game, it doesn't matter, right? We can put it down at any time. We can come back to it later. If we never finish it, it doesn't matter. So one of the things I'm getting at here is that we have to start to think of, we have to stop thinking of good words and bad words, good qualities and bad qualities. We have to start thinking of preferred qualities and unpreferred qualities. So less of, more of. So let's go on to another example. This is what I had in mind for the experience that I'm hoping that you're having right now, that you would sit in this room and you would gain some confidence about a particular aspect of UX, gain a large degree of understanding, that you would by nature have concern, that you'd be able to focus. Gladly, I don't see many of you unfocused on your phones or laptops. And then, so that comes along with some engagement. And hopefully I'm giving you a sense of urgency about this particular topic. That means, we need to do something about this. We need to change the ways we talk about our experiences and our objects. And also, just a small degree of strangeness, right? I expect this to be a somewhat new topic to most of you. Otherwise, you might have read the description and gone to a different talk. So, but coming into the room, I think, and you're not going to be able to see these because it's yellow. There's little faint yellow dashes basically to the left of all of the green ones. And it just means that less of those things prior to walking into the room. Now, strangeness might be sort of in the middle, like you knew that you didn't know exactly what I was going to talk about, so you had some element of that you wouldn't be familiar with it. But all the rest might be a little bit lower, and I'm just hoping to increase all of those by the time you walk out the door. Now, I could also follow up with many of you and ask you on a blank version of this to put down what you were feeling and where and how much or how little of it you were feeling, and get a sense from that of what was I successful or was I off base? And so, with those three things in mind, I want to introduce that this could be a measuring tool for how well we're achieving the experiences we hope to provide to people. Are we hitting the mark in terms of the experiential qualia that we know people have? And this really ties into some of what Kelly talked about. If you noticed in one of the videos she played later in the talk, I'm going to shoot myself in the eye. One of the videos she played later in the talk, a person was describing a phone, and she was describing it with the object properties. And Kelly at that moment was also saying, well, we have to, that's where they start, and then we have to go deeper. We have to understand what's under there, like why, and she called it why finding. Why do you feel that way? What makes you feel that way? Well, to me, when you get down to something that's experientially tangible, you're going to end up with a list like this. And I think the next woman in the video said something about, I just feel this emotional surge that I don't really know where it comes from, but that's just, so that's qualia. And the more we can get to the point where either we can observe it and identify it, or they can identify it verbally and we can incorporate it into something that can measure, the closer we will be able to get to designing that, to creating that, to making it real. The experience assessment chart. And do I have a timer in the room? I don't. I've got you all day. You're mine. No, I've just got a few more minutes. I want to make sure I'm on track. Does anybody have, what time are we over in here? 10 after? 5 after? Okay, I got 5 minutes. Perfect. Okay, so the next part is once you have defined an experience, once you have that set of qualia and you find out where people are and where you hope to get them in terms of that experience. How do you do that? How do you make sure yourself is the right? Make sure you are the right person to do this, or do you need to get other people to help you, or do you need to get your team to work together on this? So, just really briefly, this is a very condensed version of a longer topic that I have that goes much more in depth. It is more about management of teams. So think about this in terms of a self-assessment, and what good assessments, self-assessments usually lead to about skills is a discussion of capability, which basically boils down to what do you need to be good at and how good. Fairly simple, but it's something we all need to keep in mind as we practice our jobs. And so you need to do an assessment. Pretend you're a little diamond, and somebody's looking at, you're able to look at yourself through a loop and say, how do I have the right facets? Do I have the right degree of shine and all that kind of stuff? And when we start this sort of project or assessment with ourselves, typically we think of the big things that are incorporated into user experience. And this is not an exhaustive list, of course, but interaction design, information architecture, you know what these are. So, but the thing is that these are big, big topics, right? I've done mostly interaction design for most of my career, aside from management, but I would not claim to do every part of interaction design. User researchers typically specialize into subsets, ethnography, usability, et cetera. Same for the other disciplines listed up here. So we can't all be good at everything. And one of the reasons is there's a lot of everything. So this is something we did at Microsoft where we tried to conduct a full-scale assessment of our UX discipline. Oh, I'm out of time. Crap. All right. Full-scale assessment. And came up with all these things that applied to the practice of user experience design. Then just, I hate to do this. Skip forward. So put those in a chart. Try to understand, so come up with the ones that come up with the ones that you think you need to be good at, or your team needs to be good at in terms of achieving those experiential qualities, the qualia. And say, okay, we need to be good at mostly visual here. List the things that go into that. Be detailed about it. Break it down into things like color, line, and shape. If you use a little chart like this, like in Excel, you can do current level, desired level. So this is a 1 to 5 scale, so 1 is bad, 5 means the rest of the world looks up to you. And then priority, how important is it to this experience that you use this particular thing? Again, 1 to 5. Then you come up with very simple math, a gap, 5 minus 3 times 5 is 10. And then you can get a sense of what size of gaps do you have? How far away are you from being able to provide that experience? And then lastly, what do you need to do about it? Can I do it? Can I learn something? What areas do I need help? Do I need to hire somebody? Do I need to partner with somebody? How important is it to get help? Can I get by, or do I really need to go for that? And then what kind of help? Like I said, training, or it could be better tools, something like that. Okay, and that will enable you to create great experiences. Identifying what the experience needs to be, identifying who you need to be to create that experience, and then getting it done. And I'll wrap up very quickly. Thank you.